Hello everyone, I'm just going to spend about 7 minutes talking about some of the essential things I think every learner should start with in Python. First, I'd like to talk about the print statement and how it displays things to the console. First, let's just print the phrase hello world. So to do that, you want to set up a print statement, a set of parentheses, and then inside the parentheses you want to put quotations, hello world. And you'll see that this prints out hello world to the console. Next, I'd like to do a print statement with just single quotes instead of double quotes, just to show you that it doesn't actually matter which quotations you use. You don't have to press shift to get the double quotes. As I'll show you, it still works if you just use single quotes. So right here I print out gamer's rule. After that, I'd like to follow up and just show you two quick tricks. I'm going to do something called concatenation. I'm going to put a print statement, you win, plus \n, which means new line, and it'll put whatever is after it on the next line. And then I'm going to put not. It's a bit of a mean statement, but I think it's funny. Another thing about concatenation, I just want to show you real quick. This is a trick I learned. I didn't actually know it was a thing for a while. You can use a comma to concatenate two strings and not just the plus sign. It's just something cool that I learned, and it puts in the space for you so you don't have to accommodate for that. Lastly, I want to show you one final thing about print. You can print out an entire paragraph by just putting it in a set of triple quotes, single or double, and it'll save all the formatting for that paragraph. Next, I'd like to talk about variables. I'd like to think of these as like a box that you can store information in. First, let's define the variable x as the integer 1, and then use the print statement to display to the console that x is indeed 1. And then next, I'd like to show you that if you wanted to concatenate a string and an integer like x or 1, you would have to use the str function to convert the integer into a string. After that, I want to show you that you can define x as a string, in this case, Bilgref thinks too much, and then display that to the console, and you can use both types of concatenation without having to convert to an str to display that to the console. Lastly, I want to show that you can define a variable as an integer such as 3, and use arithmetic operators like plus, times, and exponent. Now I'd like to talk about lists, which are just like variables, except instead of just holding one value, they can hold many. Here I have a list called x, and I'm just putting 3 values in it, 3, 2, and 1. And I just want to print x to show all 3 variables, and then I want to put the length of x, which would be 3. Now I would just like to use the list x and index through it using the numbers 0, 1, and 2. Next, I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself, but I'm going to use something called an enhanced for loop just to iterate through the list and print y. More on that later. Next, I want to do indexing but in reverse, and I'm going to start at -1 and go on to -3, which will give me 3 spaces back from the last item in the list. Lastly, I just want to print that you can add 2 lists together. However, I want to show that you can't use other arithmetic operators on lists, only adding. And before I talk about my last subject, I'd like to talk about Booleans, which are just variables that can be true or false, like 1s and 0s. So I'd like to start by just printing out true and false. Then, I'd like to show you some Boolean operators like greater than and equals to, which is 2 equal signs instead of 1, which is used for defining. Next, I'm going to define x using other kinds of Boolean operators like greater than or less than or equal to. Lastly, for Booleans, I'd like to talk about or, and not. Lastly, I'd like to talk about loops, which can be used for repeating steps in a program. This first loop is just a simple while loop that uses the variable x and a Boolean operator to define whether or not x is less than 5, and while it's not less than 5, it will print I will not throw eggs at Miss Baker and add 1 to x. Now, I want to talk again about the enhanced for loop that I showed earlier. This time, I'm going to use the for loop to print every item in the list x, and you'll see that it'll count from 3, 2, 1, and then say stop, counting each item in order. And the last loop I want to talk about is an infinite loop, which is a loop that will never end. In this case, I just want to print you idiot over and over again until it stops.